Ahoy, hoy, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the DCL Show, the show where we help you navigate the waters of Disney Cruise Line. I am your host and captain, Craig Williams, and today I am joined alongside by my co-captains, including Dreams Unlimited travel agent Elaine Edwards.
Hi, friends.
And then we have senior editor of the DIS and DCLfan.com, Jackie Gailey.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, everyone. We have a great episode for you this week. We're going to try to help you decide between sailing out of Port Canaveral, Florida, and Fort Lauderdale, Disney's newest permanent home for Disney Cruise Line. And we're going to get to that in just a second. But before we do, I want to remind you this is brought to you by Dreams Unlimited Travel. If you like our content, you want to support us, book a vacation through Dreams Unlimited Travel. It costs you no extra money, and you get the support of an amazing agent. So for a free, no obligation quote, head over to dreamsunlimitedtravel.com today. And the show is also brought to you by our Patreon supporters. If you want exclusive content from the DIS team, head over to patreon.com/DISUnlimited to get more information. And I also want to remind you that we are still having our little chance to win a Disney Cruise Line vacation and supporting Give Kids a World at the same time. Dreams Unlimited Travel is giving you the chance to win a 4-night Disney Cruise Line vacation for 2 in a veranda stateroom, sailing round trip from Port Canaveral, Florida. So, if by the end of this episode you're swayed to try out Fort Lauderdale, won't be for that free cruise that you might have a chance to win. You'll be going out of Port Canaveral for that. But it's an amazing opportunity. You can get plenty of information on it by clicking on the link in our description. And all proceeds will be going to Give Kids the World Village. So if you want that chance to win a free Disney Cruise Line vacation sailing out of Port Canaveral, yeah, it's a great way to do it. So I highly, highly recommend it. But let's get on to this week's topic. And again, that is choosing between Port Canaveral, Florida, and Port Everglades, which is the new Fort Lauderdale terminal. So I had the chance to sail out of Fort Lauderdale back in December, and it was just a few weeks after they opened their new permanent home. And I definitely have some thoughts on it, and it has obviously been a little bit of time since we cruised out of there. So the first thing I want to make sure I say right up front is that I am hoping that because we were there in the first couple weeks, that they have figured out a lot of the operational issues that I encountered that I'll talk about later on, and have made it a more seamless experience. But it was definitely not perfect. And there were some things that I experienced that I just kind of scratched my head at and said, I don't think they have a plan to fix this. So I don't think it's possible. I'm not saying like right off the bat that you should not sail out of Port Everglades and Fort Lauderdale, because I think there is a lot of benefits to it, and we'll talk about the pros and cons later. But it was not a perfect experience after it wasn't a perfect experience at all. And the experience of sailing out of Port Canaveral is just, Disney has it down to a science because they've been doing it for so many years. So I think that eventually Port Everglades could get to that point where they just have everything down to a T, but was not like that right from the start. So for Fort Lauderdale, right now, the Disney Dream is currently sailing out of that port, and the Disney Magic is scheduled to start sailing on May 9th, 2024, and the port services 3, 4, and 5-night cruises to the Bahamas and Caribbean. And this port looks like it's brand new in the inside, because it is. I mean, still brand new. They're going with a Finding Nemo theme inside, so it's very whimsical. Plenty of hidden Mickeys as you look up at the ceiling that's made of all these circles, and you're like, there's a hidden Mickey, there's a hidden Mickey. It feels like it is truly a Disney home, and it does feel like it has a permanent feeling to it. And, if you only have ever sailed out of Port Canaveral, you'll be like, I don't know what you mean by that. But if you ever had to sail out of Miami or Galveston, New Orleans, even us with Vancouver, it's just not the same. You show up and you feel like you are just the next client getting ready to board there. They might be able to set up, little photo ops and little structures that still let you know, like, yes, I'm here for a Disney cruise, but it is not the same as going through those dedicated cruise lines where you walk in and you're like, this is an extension of Disney magic. And yes, Fort Lauderdale now has that, just like out of Port Canaveral, but the other places, no, you do not get that at all. I'm correct in saying that, right?
Yes,
I
and
agree.
the whole reason is that it's not necessarily Disney there all of the time, and it's not even multiple Disney cruises in the course of the week. When we went out of Vancouver, it's got all of the Disney signage, but I'm sure as soon as our ship sailed away, they flipped it around so it all said Royal Caribbean because they were going to be the next day's ship that was going to be sailing out of there. And so it's just those people are filtering in many, many cruise lines, a different one every day of the week. And so it's not Disney specific. You're not walking through the Mickey ear shaped tunnel to get on board. So,
and they do have that. So
you have to have the tunnel.
Yeah.
Oh, you have to have the tunnel.
Oh, you have to have the tunnel. But I will explain right away why my experience was on the messy side of things here. And I was on this cruise as part of a Disney media event. And, I'm not going to go in and like review the cruise, but I do feel like I have to actually review this part of the experience because this is something that every single guest is going to experience. There's only one way to get on the ship, and so I think it's important to be upfront and honest about it all. And I did have the first port arrival time, and we were traveling with my wife and our son Rory, who had just turned 1 at the time, and we, when you're traveling with an infant, you always plan on being early everywhere and then show up extremely late. And that's exactly what happened to us. I think our arrival time was for like 11:30, and we ended up getting there right around like 2:30. So, we still had wiggle room before final boarding call. We were there with a lot of other people who had not boarded the ship yet. So it wasn't not last second by any means, but we definitely overshot ours. So I got the experience of what's it like for the later groups to get on the ship, and not great. The first thing we encountered, we pulled into the garage to park because we were traveling there by car, and it was a simple signage was everywhere telling us where to go for the porters. You could see them all there. Unloaded the car, put on our baggage tags just like you would at any other cruise port. They took it away and then circled us around to go back and actually park. And it's, it was my favorite type of parking because you didn't have to pay until the end of the cruise rather than right up front like in Port Canaveral where you get that credit card out right away at the beginning. You're like, well, dang, starting my relaxing vacation by dishing out 80 to hundreds of dollars based on what the parking is. It's much nicer at the end of the cruise when you're like, oh man, I spent too much and now this too. Well, that's vacation for you. But that's just how my brain works. The parking garage there, super simple, super easy. But the thing that stressed us out, on the bottom floor, there was this giant corral filled with, it had to be 200 people that were all just shoved in. And we're like, do we have to get caught up in that nonsense? Because I don't know how we're going to do that with Rory, and he's getting fussy. He's getting hungry. This could be a nightmare. And that's when we learned that if you haven't gotten to your arrival time yet and you're there at the port, you got dropped off from the airport or by, Uber, Lyft, however you got there, if you haven't hit your arrival time, you basically just sit in this corral at the bottom floor of a parking garage. And that was not magical at all. It was bad. It was bad show, and there's nothing they can do about it. Like, they can't, at some point you have to say we can't build a waiting area. We tell you when to arrive so you don't arrive till that point. But it was not wonderful, to say the least. And then we joined, because we were already past our port arrival time, we were able to join the line right away. and the line just stretched all the way around the building. We had no idea how long it was going to take to get on the ship. It seemed like it was a never-ending cycle, and it took about 30 minutes from where we were at the back of the line. And the reason it was so bad is because they had the check-in procedure before you hit security, rather than like Disney Cruise Line, you hit your security and then you go upstairs and take care of all your details. This was all happening right as you're going to go in the building. And I was expecting, like, for check-in, breaking it down between the different tiers of Castaway Club and Concierge and, kind of entering that way. It was just all one giant free-for-all. They had signage out that made it seem like they could have different sections open for different club members, and there was a dedicated line for concierge, so they could skip everything and go straight to check-in. But it was just a never-ending back and forth queue mess that then, like, security was standing around bored because people were going so slow with check-in that they just, security had no one going through them. They were basically catering to one family at a time, going through the metal detectors and then taking a break in between each one, because that's just how slow the process was going. And for us, once we finally got through there, it was about 40 to 45 minutes total that it took us to go through the entire process. And once we did get through, we had this nice big brand new terminal for us with plenty of open seating and just, all the comfy amenities you could want of waiting for your time to board a cruise. But we didn't do any of it because we could get on the ship right away. But they had plenty of bathrooms and there was a ton of seating. You had your photo ops before you boarded the ship. There was no characters out while we were there, but again, we got there late, so I don't know how it goes for more people. But it was the terminal itself. Once you're in through security and check-in, it was very nice, very beautiful, made you feel like you were at Disney. But the process of getting to that point was just an absolute nightmare. And it was the same way for other people I talked to on that cruise. I talked to a couple other people that had also sailed out of Fort Lauderdale after I did, or even before, and they said the exact same thing. So this is one thing I'm hoping that Disney will eventually figure out, or they've already addressed, because it was not good. Elaine, have you heard any feedback from clients, from other agents about this part of the process particularly?
So I have been definitely asking my clients when they're coming back from their cruise from Fort Lauderdale, especially the ones that have traveled several times with me. They normally sail out of Port Canaveral. I've been specifically asking them, what did you feel about it? How did it go? Did you like it? That kind of thing. And it's funny because I've had like very mixed reviews. I do have one guest that had kind of the same thing that you had to say, Craig, that his problem was that he was driving from Vero Beach. They had stayed in Vero Beach before, and then they were going to drive down to Fort Lauderdale. And he told me that he did have boarding group 7. So he had an early time. I don't know what his arrival time was. That was just his boarding group that he told me. But he said that the entire drive from Vero Beach down to Fort Lauderdale was just like wall-to-wall cruise traffic, and that it was very, very hard to get there, get into the terminal, that it was just a lot of people. And that he ended up boarding with, I think he said, like, boarding group 19. Wow. Now, I had another client that was he was actually on the New Year's Eve cruise, and this client has sailed with me many times, and he loved it. He said it was that they actually arrived earlier than their port arrival time. This guest actually arrived before they even started letting boarding groups on, like they had just opened the port, and that he said, hey, we got here earlier than we intended to. Is that okay? And that they were very friendly. They were very helpful, very welcoming. They said, sure. They whisked him on through. He said after they called like the family of the day to get on the ship, that they started rapid fire calling all the rest of the boarding groups. And he had said it was like he got on in record time from arrival to boarding, that he got on super fast. Now, I have experienced both, even though I've not sailed out of Fort Lauderdale. I've experienced both of these things in Port Canaveral. I don't think that we can necessarily say that as far as how long it takes you to get on board, I've done the exact same thing. There have been times that I've arrived at Port Canaveral and I have sat in that line just to get to the terminal for a long, long, long time. And there's also been times that I've just arrived and drove right up and there was hardly anyone else around. So, you said that you did arrive later in the day than you intended to. And my guest that was talking about all of the cruise traffic, he arrived later than he intended to. My guest that arrived early had no problem at all. Yeah. So maybe that's the thing there. Now, I would say for Port Canaveral, it's probably opposite. I feel like people that are arriving between 11:30 and 12:30 at Port Canaveral, they are very stacked up. They haven't necessarily started calling boarding groups. Everybody's sitting around. It takes a while to get on the ship. There are long lines. I mean, I've sat in lines going all the way out the door at Port Canaveral as well. But when you arrive later, like after 2:00, you just walk right onto that ship because there's nobody waiting there. So that's been my personal experience. So.
Yeah. I've never had the issues that you're describing at Port Canaveral. A couple times security lines got like out of control, but never I've never sat in traffic. That to me is one of I think the perks and pros of choosing Port Canaveral is that, it's that first exit when you're coming on 528 and you cross over and you're finally heading towards all the terminals. It's that first one there, you get off and it's usually easy going. The client you talked about that had the traffic issues, 1,000% correct. It was like the same. All the cruise ships had to go on the same exit and the same roads to get to the different terminals, and I think there was 3 or 4 ships that were departing that day out of Port Canaveral or out of Port Everglades, and on top of that too, it is an industrial shipping port. And so there was just semi trucks lined up for a mile that were waiting to drop off cargo. It was a nightmare. Oof. And luckily I made a bold choice and I was like, you know what? We're going to just avoid all this. We're going to drive back roads and we're going to let Waze tell us if we're doing this right or wrong. And I was able to cut off like 15 minutes just from getting adventurous with it. But 1,000%, if you're just like, I'm going to follow the GPS, do what it tells you, you will sit in lines because it is an industrial port. Plus it is vacationers all coming together. And if you are later, then you could have issues. But I've personally never experienced that at Port Canaveral. Jackie,
and that's funny.
Settle it. Well, Elaine first. Why is it funny?
Yeah, let me just finish. Like I said, I've experienced it multiple times, and even there was when I did my back-to-back on the Wish. When we got back on for the second sailing, we were up eating lunch, and we were looking out the windows, and we were watching people come in. And we had another couple that was joining us, and we were texting with them, and they're like, "Yeah," and I think they had like an 11:30 boarding time or 12. Arrival time, and we were texting with them and they're like, yeah, we're just sitting here. And I think it probably took them a good 45 minutes to an hour to get through the line and get parked in order to even get to the terminal. I mean, it was a while because we were just sitting there watching them while we were sitting. I mean, it was stop traffic. So I know it's not as I said, I think with Port Canaveral, I think it really depends on what time you arrive. I think everybody wants to get there early, and you've got all of the buses coming from Disney World and coming from MCO, and so I think that's what it is. I think if you want to skip the traffic, you come later at Port Canaveral.
Okay, Jackie, settle it. Have you had these issues?
No, not at all. Whenever we've gone to Port Canaveral, it has been absolutely easy peasy. So we've had early arrivals and we've had late ones too. because at the beginning of my cruising adventures, I forgot to the day that I could get the port arrival time. So those would be the couple of times that we had later afternoon ones. But we never had an issue with getting in, going to park, getting through security. It's always been so quick, and we've always had so much time to just sit around up in the terminal and, look at all the things that they have up there, and just, the ship model and the photos, and just kind of chill. So it's always been super, super easy for us. Of course, it's after driving a couple hours. There was one time, and it was the only time that parking was a little tricky, and it was because it was when the Dream and the Fantasy were in that port, and the Fantasy was out on its cruise, and then the Dream was in, and so the parking garage was so full, so it was a little tricky, but not tricky to the point where it caused us any delay worth mentioning. It's just that we had to go higher up in the parking garage to find parking, but yeah, we never had issues.
Yeah. No, that is
that settles it then. Elaine knows nothing.
No, I think
we believe you.
Proves the point more that don't just listen to one person on anything with this, that take in as much information as possible. So I had to tease you a little bit there, Elaine, with it, but seriously, there's no guarantees. And the last thing you want to do is be that person who watches the cruise sail away without you. And you don't want to do that while you're at an itinerary port. You really don't want to do that on your embarkation day. That's about the best way to ruin a Disney Cruise Line cruise, is watching it leave without you. So
oh my gosh, I think I saw a video on TikTok, I'm pretty sure it was last week, and it was some people in the middle of the crosswalk with their luggage just crying because they're watching the ship leave, and I'm just like,
yep.
Woo!
And
that's why you fly into port the day before. Do not fly in the day of your cruise.
And that leads us to a beautiful segue here, where I want to talk about more pros and cons. I think a con of both Port Canaveral and Port Everglades is honestly the proximity. And I know you're probably going to give me some flack for this, someone out there, but let's be real. Port Canaveral, if you have no traffic at all from the airport, you're talking about 45 minutes, but an hour, give or take. Same thing coming from Walt Disney World property. It can be an hour. It can be an hour and a half if, there's a wreck on 528. Sometimes you can scoop by and get there in 50 minutes. It's all over the place. It's Florida traffic. With Fort Lauderdale, one of the selling points that Disney tried to make when promoting it is that you're in Florida, you're so close to the magic. No, you're 3 hours away from Walt Disney World. So if you're we'll come in and do a Walt Disney World trip and then go down, it's not just that simple. But there is a lot of close hotels, and obviously you have Fort Lauderdale has an airport, Miami has an airport. There's lots of opportunities to stay closer to that. But in terms of Central Florida, in terms of staying at Walt Disney World or even at MCO, it's not as great as it would seem. But if you do get in a day before for either destination, you're going to be fine. You're not going to miss your cruise. But I think in general, if you're talking about which is better, flying into Orlando and then staying at Walt Disney World or Orlando International Airport versus flying into Fort Lauderdale and then staying at a hotel there, you cannot beat Fort Lauderdale because the airport is 4.4 miles from the port and from Terminal 4, which is Disney's port. That means it can either take you, it could take you 10 minutes to get there and up to 45 minutes to get there because of the traffic we've already talked about. But it is so close. You will sit up on the top deck as you're waiting to depart and you're just watching planes flying in and out of the airport. That's how close you are. So the proximity is incredible for that reason. And then there's plenty of airports. There's plenty of hotels right around there too, because not only do you have Fort Lauderdale as, an incredible beach destination, but having the airport there too, you also have hotels that bunch up to it. Not that there's not hotels at Port Canaveral, but if you're flying into Orlando and you're going on a cruise out of Port Canaveral, like you're staying at Disney or the airport at the very least, right? You're not actually going to stay in Port Canaveral for the night. Like, just my opinion there. But Elaine, you said there were some hotels that you can book directly as part of your vacation package for a cruise vacation at Fort Lauderdale. What were those hotels?
Yes. So Disney Cruise Line does contract with 3 hotels, and pending availability, you can add these directly onto your cruise reservation. So that is Fort Lauderdale Marriott Harbor Beach Resort and Spa, the Hilton Fort Lauderdale Marina, and the B Ocean Resort. Again, the prices vary by the season, and it is based on availability. So if you know that you are wanting a pre-night, go ahead and add it. You can even sometimes get 2 pre-nights. So I have a lot of people that like to come in 2 days early for their cruises, and they'll go to the beach one day, or they'll do some other local stuff. But the really, really, really great thing about packaging your hotel with a cruise is then you can also add in the Disney Cruise Line transfers. And it makes everything so seamless to just go, from the airport to the hotel, to the cruise port, and then back to the airport. It really just kind of makes, everything is taken care of. That you're not going to have to fight with a taxi or anything like that. I had a guest just email me last week, and she was talking about how on her last cruise out of Fort Lauderdale that she did the hotel and the transfers herself, and that she just had a horrible time with the taxis and that kind of thing. And she's like, we are definitely adding these on this time. Yeah. So, and the really kind of nice thing when you fly out of Fort Lauderdale is that you do have that choice of airports. You don't have to fly into Fort Lauderdale. You can do Fort Lauderdale. You can do Miami. Both of them, Disney Cruise Line's transfers, services, both of them. So you can go from the port to the Miami airport, or you can go to the Fort Lauderdale airport on the Disney Cruise Line transfers. Or, as Craig said, there are people that do want to come in and to Port Canaveral and go to Disney World, go to Universal, that kind of thing, and make it kind of a 2-part land and sea vacation. And then they get a car and they drive down, or they take the new Bright Line train down.
Like you had access to my notes, Elaine.
Yes, I know, right? I'm a mind reader. So
yeah,
it does kind of give you some different options that you can kind of play around with if you're looking for something different.
Absolutely. And obviously a big selling point of Port Everglades, Fort Lauderdale, is that with the cruise ships that are coming in and out of there with the Disney Dream and the Disney Magic, you're talking about more affordable cruises ultimately
Yes.
than right now with the Wish and the Fantasy and One Day the Treasure. You can get some great rates, and that does open up options. Obviously, Miami and Orlando are massive airports. Fort Lauderdale is not, but Fort Lauderdale still services pretty much all the major U.S. carriers. You can fly Southwest, Delta, United, American, Spirit, Frontier, Allegiant, JetBlue. Short list. Some carriers have more flights in a day than others. Like Southwest seemed to be like the one that has the absolute most, which is great for a lot of people. But they're all there coming in and out.
I love a small airport too.
Yeah. It's smaller airports are just easier to get around, easier to get in and out of. But if you have to fly in for convenience to Miami or Orlando, it's not impossible. You can still do it. Brightline will literally run you from either direction. Like Elaine said, Miami, you have more options with port transfers, but Brightline is a viable option. And I only looked at Brightline coming from Orlando International Airport, going directly to the Fort Lauderdale Airport, and it's honestly not a terrible deal. If you paid attention since it opened up, you've seen a lot of vloggers, bloggers who are raving about the expensive business class that is $150 and you get your drinks and it's comfortable, all of that. That's great if you have unlimited funds, but I looked at the pricing, and basically every single day of the week, any destination or any time that you're trying to depart, if you book it far enough in advance, you're talking it's like $44 for per person, but it starts stacking up based on that too. So I looked at 2 adults and 2 kids leaving Wednesday, April 3rd for like a 4-night cruise. So Thursday, returning back on Monday from there. So you would want to leave on Wednesday to head down to the port to get in there a little early. I looked at the pricing for that, and for 2 adults and 2 kids, the total for round trip on Brightline from Orlando was $295 total for round trip. So if you're saving already $1,000 by choosing Port Everglades over Port Canaveral, and you're only talking about, and you can save money by flying into Orlando, and then you only have to spend another $300, then you still might come out way ahead by adding
you're
on
definitely
Brightline.
coming out way ahead. I mean, if you're flying into Orlando, I mean, what is your other option? You rent a car, and that car is going to sit there while you're on your cruise, and you're paying for every single day while you're on your cruise, and you're paying parking, and you're paying gas, and you're paying coals. That is a fantastic deal. That is that is great. It really is.
And a train ride is fun.
Yeah, it is.
I will say though, it's a 3-hour-ish train ride. So it's the same time that you would be driving down there. It's not faster as much as they're like bullet it with the stops and just how long it takes. It's a long train ride. Yeah. It's a long process, but a train ride it's a lot of fun. And even it's not terrible, because I said $44 if it's not one of the discounted ones, which are, if you book early enough, they're all discounted. But even if it goes up to full pricing, it's still only $59 per
You can take
seat,
a great nap in those 3 hours.
And the other thing I'll throw in there too with it is that the great part is, at least for now, I looked at those dates in April. I also looked at the same time period in July, and it's the exact same prices. It's just that standard price of, either 44 or 59 for the cheapest fare. And you can't beat that. If it's cheaper to fly into Orlando and add on that train and you get on a cheaper cruise, like, come on, just do that way. Yeah. And if you do get in the day before, there are, besides the hotels Elaine mentioned through Disney and stuff, I did look too, and some high-rated hotels near that same area. There was an Embassy Suites that, like, if you were coming this time of year, is under $200. It was like $150. A Hyatt Place was like the same price, and then there's a Courtyard by Marriott that's right beside the airport that was way under $200. That one was like in the 120s. But of course, if you look in April, May, June, July, the busy times of year where people are traveling to Fort Lauderdale for spring break, or just because, it's a beach, it's going to get pricier. You're talking close to $300 a night, $200 to $300 a night at those hotels, but there's plenty of options. So if it can save you money, I think Orlando and Brightline is actually a smart way. I know you could fly directly into Fort Lauderdale if that's an option too, but if those plane tickets end up being more expensive than flying into Orlando and adding the train in, try it out. Why not?
Yeah. And that's about what the hotels through Disney were renting. I called for a client yesterday or the day before, and they were like $240 to $280 is what they all were. So it's right there in line with what you were saying.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, ultimately, I think it just comes down, the choice between Port Canaveral or Port Everglades comes down to what's your budget and what ship do you really want to be on. I mean, if your dream is to go on the Wish and you have to stay in an inside cabin because of it and sacrifice all of it, then yeah, you're going to have a fantastic time sailing out of Port Canaveral and being on that ship, and you're going to love it. But if you don't care which ship you're on and you just want an easy experience, you want to be able to have that veranda stateroom and, feel like you're getting more stretch for your money at that point, I would say consider Port Everglades. The little bit of issues with it can be overlooked with some planning, some timing, and just, being prepared.
Yeah. Once you get on the ship, you forget all about that you had to wait in line 10 minutes to get in the port.
Yep.
You are not kidding. That is so the truth. The minute it's the tunnel. It's the Mickey ear tunnel. You walk under those ears and it all disappears.
It just melts right away.
Yep.
It does.
Gone. You order the drink of the day.
Man, I want to go on a cruise right now.
I do too.
Yep. We need to make it happen.
So desperately.
Yeah. We'll talk to John. So we'll be like, we need a DCL show team cruise planned in the near future.
Definitely.
Please and thank you.
Absolutely.
He'll say yes.
Yes.
He'll say yes.
Please and thank you.
Hey, and maybe it'll be out of Port Everglades, and then you'll get to experience it.
We can take the train.
We can take the train. Yeah. Yes. Oh, for sure. Jackie flying.
It is only research.
Yeah.
That is the thing. That is, I mean, it is our duty to our viewers. That we research this.
Completely agree.
I could be packed this afternoon.
Well, not that quickly. Let's slow down a little bit. Let's find a date that works for us first. Let's find a date. Yeah, okay. We'll get it in plan. But hopefully we just helped you, be a little bit more informed to make a choice between either one of those permanent ports in Florida. And of course, if you need any extra information, always, leave us comments. Join our Facebook group, the DCL fan group on Facebook. There will be plenty of people who can help you out with information there. If you're booking through Dreams Unlimited Travel, your agent will work with other agents as well too to get you the most up-to-date and excellent information. In case they don't have the answers, we've got this great resource of all these other agents that also have this information. So just so many. We have so many ways to offer help out there. Just take advantage of us, and we'll be able to get you to start taking the perfect vacation out there. But as we wrap up here, I want to say thank you to Elaine and Jackie for having this conversation with me. Really appreciate all your insight.
Thank you for having us.
Wow. Thank you.
Even though I am wrong sometimes.
No, not very often. But thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to listen and watch this. If you want to support us more, again, book a vacation through Dreams Unlimited Travel. Get that free no obligation quote today at dreamsunlimitedtravel.com. If you want to support us more through Patreon, you can get information on that at patreon.com/DISUnlimited. If you are watching this on YouTube, hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, leave comments, questions, video suggestions in the comments section. And if you are listening to this, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us ratings and reviews when possible. That's going to do it for this DCL show. I really hope you enjoyed it and you got something valuable out of it. And we'll see you again soon next time we set sail on another DCL show. But remember, you can't get to Castaway Cay without Disney Cruise Line.